So today our mission is to basically map out the exact origins of your inner critic.
Mm.
We are doing a massive deep dive into this really comprehensive research document from Talent Whispers.
Right. It's titled Inner Voice Origins, where saboteurs and allies are boon.
Yes. And our goal over the next hour or so is to really trace these internal voices, like all the way back to their roots in early childhood brainwave state.
It was a fascinating journey.
Oh, it really is. We are going to uncover the surprising and honestly kind of beautiful shared root that your absolute darkest saboteurs have with your biggest internal supporters.
Exactly. And most importantly, we want to figure out how to rewire them.
Right. Because, well, usually when we talk about a diagnosis in medicine, there's an expectation of precision. It's almost like engineering.
Sure. Like a broken bone.
Exactly. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is.
Right. It's very binary. It is clean. It's visible. And honestly, it's deeply comforting because it can just be categorized without any ambiguity at all. A broken bone is just a broken bone.
Right, right. But the moment you step into the world of human psychology, and specifically, the voices inside our own heads, that x-ray machine is completely useless.
Oh, absolutely useless. You're looking at an internal landscape that is just the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Yeah. I mean, you can't exactly put a stethoscope to someone's forehead and hear what they're saying to themselves.
No, you really can't.
And yet everyone listening to this deep dive right now, you, me, the person bagging groceries down the street, everyone has an internal heckler.
Oh, universally. We all know the one.
We all know it. That voice that occasionally whispers or, sometimes it just absolutely shouts that you aren't good enough or that you aren't smart enough or that your latest success was just this total fluke that everyone is about to see right through.
Right. It is arguably the most universal human experience that exists. And yet, paradoxically, it feels incredibly isolating when it actually happens to you.
It really does.
You sit there in a meeting or you're lying awake at 2 a.m. and you are just entirely convinced that you are the single only person on Earth who is fundamentally flawed in this very specific way.
Right, because it feels like an undeniable truth.
Yeah.
Like if it is in your own head and it's in your own voice, you just naturally assume it must be an objective assessment of your true capability.
Exactly. You think it's the truth.
But the foundational premise of this Talent Whisperers research is, honestly, it's a complete paradigm shift.
It is.
Like, what if that incredibly convincing critic isn't actually a reflection of reality at all? What if it is just a faulty, outdated recording from a time when your brain functioned entirely differently than it does today?
And that right there is the core of what we're unpacking today. Because to understand how to leverage these voices or how to, sort of hack our own psychology, we have to start by clearly defining the threat. We need to distinguish between the hecklers we face out there in the real world and the ones that live inside our own nervous system.
Okay, yeah, let's draw that line. Because the research makes a very sharp distinction between an external heckler and an internal one.
Yes, it does.
And an external heckler is pretty obvious, right? Like, that is the boss giving you a brutal performance review, or a stranger mocking you on social media, or even just a sarcastic, cutting comment from a close friend.
Yeah, the external heckler basically exists anywhere we might be judged or evaluated, particularly in environments where we actively crave acceptance and belonging.
Which is everywhere for us humans.
Exactly. Human beings, as a deeply social species, we are just exquisitely sensitive to these external social signals. I mean, even a subtle feeling of being, say, excluded from a group conversation can trigger a massive stress response in the brain.
Oh, totally. We've all felt that.
Right. But the critical observation that this research makes is that not every external heckler lands with equal power.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, just think about your own life. Some criticisms bounce right off you. Someone insults your taste in music, you just roll your eyes, and you genuinely never think about it again.
Yeah, that's true. I don't care if someone hates my Spotify playlist.
Right. But then someone makes a passing comment about, say, how you handled a client presentation, or maybe the tone of a specific email you sent.
Oh, man, and it just ruins your entire week.
It pierces the armor entirely. You replay it 1,000 times in the shower.
Absolutely. I've been there.
And we have to ask why. Why does one piece of criticism just vanish into thin air, while another becomes this lingering, awful torment?
Right. What's the difference?
The research argues that the answer lies entirely with the internal heckler. An external heckler's comment only lands with devastating force if an internal heckler already exists inside of you to give it credence.
Wow, okay, that is a massive concept.
It really is.
So the outside voice is really just ringing a bell that's already hanging in the bell tower. If the bell isn't there, there's literally no sound.
That is a great way to look at it. The external insult is just the trigger. The internal heckler is the actual mechanism that fires.
Right.
The internal voice chimes in and basically says, see?
Yeah.
I told you. They noticed. You really aren't smart enough to be in this role.
Yeah, it confirms the worst fear.
Exactly. And what makes these internal voices so incredibly dangerous is that they don't feel like an attack. They feel like a confirmation of a dark truth that you have been hiding from the world.
Man, because they sound exactly like us. I mean, I wasn't born judging myself for making a typo in a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, of course not.
A newborn baby doesn't have imposter syndrome.
Definitely not.
So if these external comments only hurt because an internal voice agrees with them, we really have to figure out how that internal voice got installed in the first place.
Yes.
And the source text points us to a very specific, almost, I don't know, sci-fi sounding phase of human development. They call it the imprint period.
Right. The imprint period. And to really understand this, we need to dive into the neurobiology of a developing child.
Okay, let's do it.
Because between the ages of roughly 2 and 7, the human brain is not operating the way your adult brain is operating right now.
Okay.
We tend to think of children as just, miniature adults who just don't know as many facts yet.
Right, like they're just lacking data.
Exactly. But that is biologically incorrect. During these imprint years, the brain spends a massive, disproportionate amount of time in slower wave electrical states, specifically what we call the theta state.
Okay, theta waves. I have definitely heard of alpha and beta waves, but explain what a theta wave actually means for someone's day-to-day consciousness.
Sure. So brain waves are measured in hertz, which is really just the number of electrical cycles per second.
Got it.
Right now, as we are talking, you and I are in a beta state. It's fast, alert, analytical, maybe around 14 to 30 hertz.
Okay, so we're awake and processing.
Right. But theta waves operate at a much slower frequency, around 4 to 8 hertz.
Oh, wow. That's a lot slower.
It's very slow. For a healthy adult, you typically only experience a theta state in those few fleeting moments right as you are drifting off to sleep. Or perhaps in a state of profound, really deep meditation.
Okay.
It is a state that is characterized by high suggestibility, rapid emotional learning, and really intense neuroplasticity.
Wait, let me stop you there. Are you saying that a 4-year-old, just walking around the playground wide awake, eating a snack, is essentially operating in a state of borderline hypnosis?
Yes, actually. That is a highly accurate way to visualize it.
That is wild.
It is. Maria Montessori historically referred to this as the absorbent mind.
The absorbent mind, I like that.
Yeah, and the evolutionary purpose of this state is pure survival. The child's brain is incredibly plastic, meaning it is rapidly wiring itself to understand language, complex social norms, and emotional responses. And it does all this without needing explicit logical instruction.
They really are just little sponges.
They are absolute sponges. But the danger lies in what the brain fundamentally lacks during this theta-dominant phase.
Right, and the research calls this the critical faculty.
The critical faculty, yes. This is the brain's analytical filter. It is heavily reliant on the prefrontal cortex, which is very, very underdeveloped in early childhood.
Okay.
For you as an adult, the critical faculty is basically the bouncer at the door of your mind.
I love that analogy.
Right. If someone walks up to you and says, "The sky is green," your critical faculty evaluates that statement, checks it against your stored knowledge, and says, "Nope, reject that. That is false."
Obviously.
Or if someone insults you on the subway, your critical faculty might say, "Well, that person is unstable. This isn't about me." And it just rejects the insult.
But between the ages of 2 and 7, there is no bouncer at the door.
None at all. The analytical filter is simply not online yet.
Wow.
The mind functions almost entirely as a pure recorder rather than an editor. It takes in messages, environmental cues, emotional tones, all without any ability to contextualize, reinterpret, or reject them.
Okay, reading through the research, this visual hit me. Imagine the childhood brain is this highly sensitive, state-of-the-art audio recorder.
Yes.
And the record button isn't just pressed. It is jammed down with industrial duct tape. It is recording absolutely everything. The words people say, the tension in the room when money is discussed, the sigh a teacher makes, it is all going onto the hard drive.
Everything is logged.
But here is the terrifying part. This machine has no edit button and it has absolutely no delete button.
I would actually push that analogy even further.
Okay, do it.
Not only is there no edit button, but because there is no critical faculty, everything that is recorded is instantly logged as a fundamental law of the universe.
Oh, man.
The child doesn't record an event happened. The child records, this is the way reality works.
Let's ground this in the specific example the research provides, because I think it helps. Walk us through a normal, everyday interaction and how the theta state distorts it.
Sure, so imagine a parent comes home from work. They have been stuck in traffic, their boss yelled at them, the mortgage is due, and they are completely overwhelmed by a dozen adult problems.
Problems that have absolutely nothing to do with their child.
Exactly, nothing at all. But the 5-year-old child runs up to the door, incredibly excited, wanting to play, maybe being a little bit loud.
As kids do.
Right. And the parent, in a completely human, fleeting moment of exhaustion, just snaps and says, "You're always in the way, just go to your room."
Oof. Now, if a roommate said that to me, my adult brain thinks, wow, somebody had a terrible Tuesday. I'm going to give them some space and they will apologize later.
Because you have context.
Exactly, I have context.
You have context, and you have a prefrontal cortex that can separate another person's emotional state from your own core identity.
Right.
The child in the theta state cannot do either of those things. The lack of a critical faculty means they do not hear a passing moment of frustration.
They can't reason it out.
No. They cannot reason, oh, mom is worried about her presentation tomorrow. They bypass all of that entirely. What drops onto the hard drive is an absolute, undeniable fact about reality.
Which is, I am always in the way.
Yes, my presence is a burden.
That is just deeply unsettling because it bypasses all the defense mechanisms we rely on, and it just pours the concrete right into the foundation of their identity.
That's a great way to phrase it.
But I have a major question here, and I think a lot of people listening are probably feeling the exact same way right now.
Okay, what is it?
If we are just recording everything like a jam tape recorder, we are recording thousands of comments a week, right? Good, bad, neutral, everything.
Yes, all of it.
So how do random fleeting recordings turn into a permanent, highly opinionated inner critic that lasts for decades? Because surely one grumpy comment from a tired parent on a Tuesday in 1998 doesn't ruin a child for life.
No, definitely not.
Right, because if that were true, every human being on the planet would be completely non-functional.
You're hitting on a crucial biological distinction here. One comment does not create a lifelong saboteur.
Okay, good.
If we connect this to the broader mechanics of neuroscience, we have to look away from isolated incidents and look entirely at repetition. Repetition and relational dynamics over time. It is the pattern that actually shapes the structure of the brain.
Okay, so it's the difference between walking across a lawn once and walking across it every single day for 5 years until you literally wear a dirt path into the grass.
That is exactly what happens on a cellular level. In neurobiology, there is a foundational axiom. Neurons that fire together wire together.
I've heard that. Firing and wiring.
Right. When a message is repeated, and especially when a message is charged with intense emotional significance, like the threat of losing a caregiver's approval, the brain physically builds and strengthens the neural pathways for that specific thought.
Okay.
It initiates a biological process called myelination.
Let's unpack myelination, because I really want to make sure we aren't just throwing around clinical terms here. What is actually physically happening in the brain when you say myelination?
Good question.
Yeah.
Think of a neural pathway like a raw, exposed copper wire that is carrying an electrical signal.
Got the visual.
If you use that pathway a lot, the brain recognizes that this information is important for your survival. So to make that signal travel faster and more efficiently, the brain begins to wrap that neural wire in a white, fatty substance called myelin.
Okay.
It is exactly like wrapping electrical tape around that raw copper wire. The more a thought is repeated, the thicker the myelin sheath becomes.
Oh, wow.
And a heavily myelinated pathway can transmit a thought up to 100 times faster than an unmyelinated one.
100 times faster. So the brain is literally paving an incredibly fast, frictionless superhighway for the negative thought.
It is structurally altering itself, yes. And simultaneously, it engages in what we call synaptic pruning.
Pruning, like a tree.
Exactly. The pathways that aren't used, which might be the pathways related to self-compassion or grace, they are treated like weeds in a garden. The brain literally prunes them away to conserve energy for those superhighways.
So a passing message heard once is just a raw wire. It might spark and then just fade away.
Right.
But a message heard repeatedly over the years of the imprint period gets wrapped in layers and layers of this electrical tape until it becomes the absolute default route for electricity in the brain.
Yes.
The statement becomes a truth, the truth becomes an identity, and then the identity becomes a voice.
Well said. And that brings us to the most complex part of this whole dynamic. We have to look at why these specific critical statements get repeated so often in childhood.
Right, where is the repetition coming from?
This introduces what the source text calls the parent-child expectation disappointment co-evolution dynamic.
The parent-child expectation disappointment co-evolution dynamic. That is a very dense phrase.
It's a mouthful, yes.
But the mechanics of it are fascinating and honestly a little tragic, because this dynamic isn't born out of malice. We aren't talking about cartoon villains here.
No, not at all.
We are talking about biology and, strangely enough, love.
It is entirely rooted in evolutionary biology. Let's break down the two sides of this loop, starting with the child.
Okay.
The research notes that children have a deep, evolutionary, adaptive drive to seek approval from their caregivers.
Which makes sense.
Right. This is not a personality quirk. This is a strict biological survival imperative. For a toddler, alignment with the caregiver literally equals safety. It means you will be fed, you will be protected from predators, and you will be sheltered.
Right. I mean, a toddler wandering away from the tribe thousands of years ago just didn't survive.
Exactly.
Disapproval isn't just a bummer for a kid. On a primal level, disapproval feels like a threat of abandonment, which basically equals death.
It is a life or death stressor for them.
So the child's nervous system is constantly scanning the environment, constantly reaching, trying to crack the code of what behavior actually elicits approval.
Yes. And then, on the other side of the loop, you have the parent.
Okay, let's look at the parent.
The parent is not a neutral, detached observer here. Parents naturally, instinctively want their kids to achieve heights that they themselves couldn't reach.
Sure, every generation wants better for the next.
They look at their child and want to provide opportunities, security, and success that might have been completely out of reach in their own upbringing.
And this is where the disconnect really begins.
Yes.
Walk us through how this plays out in real time. Let's say the child does something well, like they learn to read a difficult word or they perform really well at a piano recital.
Okay, so when the child reaches that milestone, they feel a huge surge of hope. They look to the parent smiles, gives praise, and the child's nervous system relaxes.
The approval is secured.
Approval secured, I am safe. But simultaneously, the parent, seeing this progress, feels a surge of excitement. The horizon of possibility expands in the parent's mind. They realize the child is capable of more than they thought, and so often entirely unconsciously, the parent subtly raises their expectations.
The child takes a step forward, and the parent literally moves the finish line.
Exactly. Now, from the parent's conscious perspective, this trajectory is beautiful. It feels entirely upward.
Yeah, they're proud.
Right. Each step forward proves the child's potential. They are pushing the child out of a genuine desire to see them flourish.
But the child is experiencing a totally different reality.
Completely different. To the child, the target is constantly, maddeningly shifting. What once felt like a triumph, what once secured that vital survival approval, suddenly feels like insufficiency.
Wow.
They reach the goal, but the approval is immediately made contingent on reaching the next goal. The piano recital was good, but now we need to prepare for the regional competition. B+ was great, but next term it should be an A.
Okay, I really need to challenge this because I can hear parents listening right now getting defensive. And honestly, I get it.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. Are we damning good parenting here? Are we saying that a parent pushing a kid to be their absolute best, which is literally what society tells us is the hallmark of a loving parent, is actually what hardwires an inner demon?
I see why it feels that way.
Because that feels like a brutal, impossible catch-come-to. If you don't push them, you are neglectful. If you do push them, you build a saboteur.
It is a profound paradox, and the research is very careful not to villainize the parent here. The tragedy of this dynamic is that it is usually invisible to both parties.
Invisible how?
The parents genuinely believe they are providing expanded opportunities. They are calibrating their expectations against their own past reality.
Right, trying to give the kid what they didn't have.
Exactly. But we have to look at the somatic, bodily reality of the child. The child doesn't understand the parent's complex emotional history.
They don't know about the parent's past struggles.
No, of course not. The child is just navigating a system where approval is always one step away.
The text describes the child's experience as feeling a Subtle, perpetual tension. A reaching that does not quite land.
It's a very evocative phrase.
That phrasing is just devastating. A reaching that does not quite land. Because anyone listening knows exactly what that feels like.
We all do.
It is the feeling that no matter what I do, no matter how many promotions I secure, how clean I keep my house, or how much money I put in the bank, I am still, somehow, fundamentally falling short.
And that feeling of perpetual tension repeated over years of the imprint period is what gets heavily myelinated into the brain.
That becomes the superhighway.
It becomes the default superhighway.
Yeah.
And this triggers a fascinating and slightly terrifying psychoanalytic process called introjection.
Introjection. Okay, let's spend some time here. What is the actual mechanism of introjection?
Introjection is the process by which an individual unconsciously absorbs the values, attitudes, and criticisms of another person, usually an authority figure. They absorb them directly into their own psyche. In this context, it means that the external voices of the parent or the teacher gradually shed the sound of the original speaker, and they take on the sound of the individual's own internal voice.
Okay, so let me visualize this. When I am 5 years old and I bring home a messy drawing, the voice says, "You need to try harder on this." And it clearly sounds like my dad.
Right. You know it's him.
I know it is an external critique, but by the time I am 25 and I draft an imperfect email, the voice says, "You need to do better on this." And it sounds entirely like me.
Precisely. The original speaker fades from view entirely. The parent doesn't even need to be in the room anymore.
They don't even have to be alive.
Exactly. They could be living in another country, or they could have passed away years ago. But the heavily myelinated neural pattern continues to run automatically. It becomes a permanent script. And because it now sounds indistinguishable from your own conscious thoughts, it feels deeply, undeniably true. You no longer need the external heckler at all. You have become the primary, most efficient repeater of your own criticism.
That is the internalized heckler, the saboteur.
Yes.
It's literally an echo of a shifting target from 2 decades ago.
That's exactly what it is.
But, I mean, this leaves us in a really bleak place.
It does sound bleak.
If a well-meaning parent pushing their kid creates this relentless internal demon through the mechanics of myelination and introjection, are we just doomed? Have we all just been inadvertently ruined by the people who loved us the most?
And this is exactly where the research takes a massive, profound turn.
Oh, thank goodness.
Because you are partially right. The parents' high expectations and the shifting target did create the conditions for the saboteur, but importantly, they also created something else entirely.
Okay.
And this introduces the core revelation of the document, the shared root hypothesis.
The shared root. When I got to this part of the source material, I actually had to put the text down and just stare at the wall for a minute.
It's powerful.
Explain the shared root for everyone.
The hypothesis suggests a beautiful paradox. The exact same authority figure who implanted your deepest self-doubt, the saboteur, is usually the exact same person who implanted your deepest belief in your own potential.
Because if they didn't believe you were capable of greatness, they wouldn't have kept pushing you. They wouldn't have kept moving the target.
Exactly. The saboteur is fundamentally a distorted expression of a mentor or parent's original, genuine belief in you.
Wow.
The text makes it explicit. Had they not believed in your capacity, they would not have had higher expectations for you. They would have just accepted the messy drawing or the B+ and moved on.
Right. They would have just said, well, that's the best they can do.
Yes. The friction was created by their belief that you possessed an untapped reserve of talent.
So the villain and the hero in our heads share the exact same origin story.
Yes, they do. During that exact same imprint period, alongside the tension and the shifting targets, the child is also absorbing moments of profound encouragement, patience, steadiness, and trust.
All right, it's not all bad.
Exactly. The parent is validating the child's potential. These positive experiences are also being recorded. They're also being myelinated. They form the neural pathways that become what we call the ally voices.
But wait, if the saboteur and the ally are formed at the exact same time by the exact same person in the exact same brain, why is the saboteur always so much louder?
That's a great question.
Why does the inner heckler have like a megaphone and a stadium sound system, while the ally is whispering from the very back row of the auditorium?
It comes down to evolutionary neurobiology again. Specifically, a mechanism within the amygdala known as the negativity bias.
Negativity bias. I think we've all felt that.
Oh, definitely. The human brain is hardwired to prioritize negative information over positive information, simply because negative information usually represents a threat.
Okay, yeah.
From a pure survival standpoint, ignoring a compliment won't kill you.
Okay.
You might miss out on feeling good for a moment, but you will survive. But ignoring a threat, like a rustle in the bushes that might be a predator, or for a child, a shift in tone that might mean the loss of caregiver approval, that could be instantly fatal.
So the brain cares about keeping you alive, not keeping you happy.
Exactly. Survival over happiness. Always.
So the saboteur is loud because it is broadcasting on a primal survival frequency. It is screaming, "You aren't good enough, and if you don't fix this flaw right now, the tribe will abandon you and you will die."
Precisely. The saboteur is driven by fear, urgency, and adrenaline. It demands your immediate attention.
And the ally.
The ally voice, on the other hand, is born of safety, trust, and steady belief. Safety doesn't require an adrenaline spike. The ally doesn't need to scream.
Right. It's calm.
It speaks with much less urgency, which makes it much easier to miss in the daily noise of our lives. But the research strongly emphasizes this point. Quieter does not mean weaker.
Okay, that is so important. If you learn to tune your ear to it, the ally has just as much structural conviction as the saboteur.
Yes?
Now, to help listeners conceptualize how we can have both of these wildly different voices operating simultaneously, how we can feel so split down the middle sometimes, the text brings in a framework called dialogical self-theory, or DST.
Yes, Hubert Herman's dialogical self-theory. It's essential for understanding this internal landscape.
Break it down for us.
We culturally tend to think of our identity as a single, unified consciousness, a monolithic self.
Right, like there's just one me.
But DST proposes that our identity actually functions much more like a society of mind.
A society of mind. I really love that phrase. Instead of a single pilot flying the plane, it's more like my brain is a crowded, somewhat dysfunctional corporate boardroom.
That is a brilliant way to picture it. Yes, it is a polyphonic space, meaning many voices, populated by multiple, what Herman's calls I positions.
I position.
You have the I as an ambitious professional, I as a vulnerable child, I as a harsh critic, I as a compassionate friend. And these voices don't just sit statically in the boardroom. They interact.
They talk to each other.
They argue, they negotiate, they form alliances, and they debate with each other constantly.
So practically speaking, when I am sitting at my laptop and I'm agonizing over whether to send a really high-stakes email, and I feel totally paralyzed.
Yes.
It is not because my single identity is broken. It is because the inner critic position is aggressively arguing with the ambitious professional position in real time, right there in the boardroom.
Exactly. You are experiencing an active internal negotiation. And to layer another incredibly useful psychological framework onto this boardroom analogy, we can look at Eric Bernet's transactional analysis.
Oh, transactional analysis. Let's get into that.
Bernet proposed that we internalize 3 distinct ego states: the parent, the adult, and the child.
Let's map those onto what we've been discussing. Where do the saboteur and the ally fit into this transactional analysis?
Well, during that early theta dominant imprint period, the parent ego state forms through absolute unfiltered absorption.
Right, the tape recorder.
Every tone of voice, every sigh of disappointment, every cheer of encouragement from your caregivers enters and builds the parent state. As you mature, both your saboteur and your ally emerge directly from this internalized parent state.
Okay, so they both live in that parent state.
Yes. The saboteur is the internal echo of the harsher, demanding, critical side of the parent. You should be doing better. This isn't enough.
And the ally.
The ally is the internal echo of the supportive, nurturing side of that exact same parent. I know you are capable of this. Take a breath.
So they both feel incredibly authoritative because they both originate from the earliest, most godlike authority we ever knew.
Precisely. And realizing the shared origin is a massive paradigm shift. It really allows you to move away from a binary model of resentment and blame toward your caregivers.
Right, it stops being black and white.
And you move toward an understanding of the profound complexity of the human experience.
The source material actually uses a really powerful pop culture example to illustrate this exact shift. And I want to spend some time on it because it brings all of this theory into really sharp emotional focus.
It's a great example.
They bring up a scene from the television show Ted Lasso, specifically the climactic confrontation between the character Nate and his father.
It is basically a masterclass in depicting introjection and the revelation of the shared root.
Right. So for listeners who haven't seen it, Nate is a character who spent his entire life driven by this ferocious, deeply toxic inner saboteur. He constantly feels inadequate. he is paranoid, and he lashes out cruelly at others because he is fundamentally convinced his father never approved of him.
The target was always shifting for Nate.
Exactly. And finally, after seasons of buildup, he confronts his dad. And he starts with this laundry list of grievances. He unloads all the ways his father made him feel small, all the tension, all the unearned reaching. He is confronting the external source of his internal heckler.
And it is crucial to note how the father responds here, because it shifts the entire psychological framing of the scene.
The father doesn't deny it, but he reveals his own side of the story.
Yes.
His father reveals his own deep limitations, his own profound fears as an immigrant trying to make sure his son survived in a harsh, unforgiving world. The father wasn't pushing Nate to destroy him. He was pushing Nate because he was terrified that if Nate wasn't absolute perfection, the world would crush him.
And what happens in Nate's nervous system in that moment?
You can literally see the somatic shift on screen. The tension in Nate's jaw just drops. His breathing changes. He realizes that his father's relentless pressure wasn't born out of a belief that Nate was worthless.
No, not at all.
It was born out of intense fear and a desperate, flawed desire to make Nate unimpeachable.
The research points out that in this specific interaction, the need for moral forgiveness, the somewhat rigid idea that one person is entirely wrong, the other is entirely a victim, and a pardon must be granted that just vanishes.
It's gone.
It is replaced by the simple, profound clarity of two humans seeing each other's limitations truly. The shifting target and the impossible expectations are suddenly understood not as malice, but as desperately misaligned intent.
Nate sees the shared root. He sees that the father who accidentally built his saboteur is the exact same father who gave him the meticulous drive that made him a genius tactician. The origin of his trauma and the origin of his talent are the exact same thing.
And it highlights a core takeaway of this deep dive. When our understanding of a situation grows large enough, the entire structure of blame begins to dissolve.
Wow. Okay, I am tracking with this. It is a beautiful conceptual understanding.
It is.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate for the listener right now because this brings us to the most urgent, practical question of this entire deep dive.
Okay, let's hear it.
This is great theory, but what does this mean for me on a Tuesday morning?
The practical application.
Right. If I am a 30-something professional and my internal parent ego state has been screaming at me to be perfect for 20 years, I can't just evict it from the boardroom. I am stuck with these neurological recordings myelinated into my brain since I was 5.
Yes, you were.
So how do I actually stop the saboteur from paralyzing my life, and how do I leverage it to my advantage?
This is exactly where we transition from theory into the application phase. And the very first, and easily the most counterintuitive rule the research lays out is this. Your goal is not to erase, defeat, or silence the saboteur.
I have to push back on that. Why wouldn't I want to silence it? When my brain says, you're an imposter and everyone is going to find out, my immediate instinct is to fight it. I want to scream back, no, I'm not. I earned this promotion.
I know, it's the natural instinct. But engaging in that fight is exactly what gives the saboteur its power.
How so?
When you fight the voice, you are validating its premise. You are treating the voice as an equal adversary, as a legitimate, objective truth that must be combated on the battlefield of your mind.
Oh, I see.
The research is clinically clear on this. You cannot instantly unwind heavily myelinated neural pathways that your mind has practiced for decades simply by shouting at them. Arguing with the saboteur just creates more electrical activity in that exact same pathway.
You're just adding more myelin.
Exactly. You're making the superhighway stronger.
So if I can't fight it and I can't delete it, what am I supposed to do when it flares up?
You must fundamentally shift your relationship to what you are hearing. The goal is to recognize it as a voice, not as reality. This is a psychological technique known as cognitive diffusion.
Cognitive diffusion. Okay, I was trying to come up with a good visual for this while reading the notes. I initially thought of it like a background app running on a phone, draining the battery.
Okay.
You open the task manager and see it. But let's try something more visceral.
Let's hear it.
It's like sitting in a movie theater. When you are watching a terrifying movie, you are completely lost in the illusion. Your heart is racing, you are sweating, you think the monster is real.
You're immersed.
Cognitive diffusion is the moment you force yourself to turn your head away from the screen and look back at the projector booth. You see the beam of light cutting through the dust. Suddenly you realize you aren't in danger. It's just light being projected onto a wall.
That is a phenomenal analogy. You are breaking the spell of the illusion. You are loosening the fusion between your core identity, the person sitting in the theater, and the thought which is the movie playing on the screen.
Right.
You realize that the saboteur is just an old piece of film, an old recording from childhood being projected onto the wall of your current reality.
But the movie is still playing. The notifications still pop up. The voice still says, you should have done better. You should be further along in your career by now.
Yes, it does. And that specific use of the word should brings us to Karen Horney's psychoanalytic concept of the tyranny of the shoulds.
The tyranny of the shoulds.
Horney identified that our deepest internal conflicts rarely stem from what we are actually doing, but from the rigid, punishing internal demands we place on ourselves, the idealized, impossible version of who we should be.
The saboteur speaks exclusively in the language of should.
Always. Because the shoulds were absorbed during that early imprint period, they were the young child's emotional interpretation of what survival and approval required.
Like, I should be perfect so dad doesn't sigh.
Or, I should never make a mistake so mom doesn't stress. When you utilize cognitive diffusion, when you look at the projector beam, you recognize that these aren't absolute moral laws of the universe.
Right.
They're just old, outdated childhood survival tactics based on a shifting target.
So you literally say to yourself, there's that old patterned recording born from high expectations acting up again.
Exactly. You acknowledge its presence without accepting its premise. And once you create that distance, you can introduce a structural philosophy the text refers to as everything is a gift.
I am going to stop you right there.
I thought you might.
Because everything is a gift sounds dangerously close to toxic positivity. And I know our listeners are highly allergic to the kind of self-help advice that tells you to just smile when your house burns down.
It does sound like that at first glance.
Right. If I get laid off from my job or I fail a critical exam, I'm not going to sit on my couch and call it a gift. How is this actually structurally different from just pretending bad things are fine?
It is a vital distinction to make, and your skepticism is totally warranted. Toxic positivity is fundamentally about denial. It demands that you suppress negative emotions, ignore the pain of reality, and plaster a fake smile over a genuine wound.
Right, which is unhealthy.
Exactly. Everything is a gift is the exact opposite. It is a deliberate, aggressive, cognitive reappraisal. It fully accepts the painful reality of a situation, including the failure, the grief, and the sting of harsh criticism, but it forces a reinterpretation of its utility.
Utility, so it's about extracting value, not pretending it doesn't hurt.
Precisely. It is about taking the saboteur's relentless criticism and turning it into a neural upgrade. The text uses a very specific reframing technique here, treating setbacks and failures as tuition rather than trauma.
Tuition rather than trauma. Oh, I love the mechanics of that phrasing.
It's powerful, isn't it?
It is. Because trauma implies lasting, permanent damage that you just have to suffer through and survive. You are a passive victim to trauma. But tuition implies you willingly paid a steep, painful price, but you acquired incredibly valuable, specific knowledge in exchange. You bought something with the pain.
Exactly. Let's look at how this works in practice. Let's say you bomb a major client presentation.
Okay, worst nightmare.
The saboteur immediately jumps into the boardroom and starts screaming, "You are incompetent! You always fail! You should quit!"
Typical saboteur.
If you fight it, you spiral into panic. If you use toxic positivity, you say, "Oh, it went great, no one noticed." It's delusional.
Right. But if you use the everything is a gift framework.
You observe the voice, you look at the projector beam, you acknowledge the pain, and then you ask a clinical question. What specific, actionable data can I extract from this humiliating failure to build a higher baseline of capability for tomorrow? You are actively taking the raw, intense energy of the saboteur, its urgency, its hyper-focus on the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and you are consciously feeding that energy into a process of growth.
You are opening a different you are calling the ally to the boardroom table.
Exactly.
The ally steps in and says, okay, that was brutal. We survived it, but it hurt. Now, what exact slide did we lose them on? What do we need to learn?
Yes. And we must emphasize that this process is not merely an intellectual exercise happening in the ether of your mind. It is deeply physical.
Right, the body.
The text references the pioneering trauma work of Bessel van der Kolk, specifically his book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Great book.
These internal voices, especially the harsh, critical ones, are somatically encoded. They live in your nervous system.
This is so true. When the saboteur speaks, you don't just hear words. You feel a physiological cascade. Your chest tightens, your breathing gets shallow, your stomach drops, your jaw clenches.
What you are feeling is your amygdala perceiving a threat and flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline. The vagus nerve is transmitting panic signals to your organs.
Right.
So active, mindful observation, diffusing from the thought, isn't just about changing your philosophy, it is about regulating your biology.
How does acknowledging the voice actually change the biology?
By pausing, taking a deep breath, and explicitly naming the voice, saying something like, I am noticing that my internalized critic is currently very active. By doing that, you force your prefrontal cortex to engage.
Which is the logical part.
The prefrontal cortex is the logical analytical part of the brain. When it activates, it physically sends inhibitory signals down to the amygdala, dampening the panic response.
Oh, wow.
You literally biologically calm the body down, and it is only in that physiological space of calm that the quieter, less urgent ally voice can finally be heard.
It is incredible how mechanical it all is, right beneath the emotion.
It's all wiring.
Which actually gives me a massive amount of hope. If it is mechanical, it can be managed.
Yeah.
It's not magic, it's neuroscience.
Exactly.
But this brings up a really crucial pivot in our deep dive. We have spent this entire time dissecting how we handle the voices inside us. But we do not live in a vacuum. We interact with people every day.
We do.
What about the voices we are implanting in others?
This is the necessary natural progression of the inquiry. If we understand how the brain records and myelinates these voices, we have an ethical responsibility regarding how we speak to others.
Right, because if you are a parent raising a child, or a manager leading a team, or a coach training an athlete, you cannot just let them coast. You have to push people. You must have high expectations, or nobody ever grows.
That's true.
But based on the shifting target dynamic we just discussed, how do you challenge someone to grow without accidentally installing a lifelong tyrannical saboteur in their head? How do you push without breaking?
It requires a profound shift in how we lead and mentor. We must move from unconscious, reactive expectation setting to conscious, strategic stretching.
Okay, conscious stretching.
To explain how to do this safely, the text integrates what it calls the Learned Resilience THRIVE framework with the developmental theories of Lev Vygotsky.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of challenging people safely.
The central operating concept here is drawn from complexity science. It is the idea of operating at the edge of chaos.
The edge of chaos. I mean, it sounds like a reckless place to put an employee or a child.
The name is dramatic, yes, but the concept is mathematically precise. The edge of chaos is the boundary between rigid order where nothing changes and total randomness where systems collapse.
Right.
In human psychology and development, significant growth does not happen in the comfort zone. It happens when our analogical muscles, our cognitive, emotional, and physical capacities are stretched to the point of greatest tension just before they snap.
It's exactly like hypertrophy in weightlifting.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
If you lift a weight that is easy, your muscles don't change. You have to lift heavy enough to create physical micro-tears in the muscle fibers, which the body then rebuilds stronger.
Right.
But, and this is the key, if you load too much weight, you don't build muscle. You just tear a ligament, drop the barbell on yourself, and end up in the hospital.
That is the perfect physical analogy for a psychological process. In cognitive psychology, this optimal stretch zone, the weight that creates microtears without breaking the ligament, was defined by Lev Vygotsky as the zone of proximal development, or the ZPD.
Break down the ZPD for us.
The ZPD is the conceptual space just beyond what a learner can currently achieve independently, but which is entirely within their reach if they have the right guidance, structure, and support from a mentor.
It is the sweet spot of difficulty.
Exactly.
So how does the ZPD relate to the creation of inner voices?
Operating within the ZPD is the fundamental difference between building an ally and building a saboteur.
Really? Just that zone?
Yes. When a mentor challenges a learner within their ZPD and the stretch is properly scaffolded and emotionally supported, the learner internalizes a profound sense of capability.
Because they succeed with help.
They endure the struggle, they succeed, and their brain records, I can face hard, painful things and survive. That heavily myelinated pathway becomes the foundation of their internal ally voice.
But what happens if the stretch goes too far? What if the manager dumps a massive project on a junior employee with zero guidance?
If the expectations wildly exceed the learner's emotional or developmental capacity, if they are pushed past the edge of chaos into total system failure, and they are left entirely unsupported, the stretch becomes overwhelming trauma, They fail, and the brain records that failure without context. They internalize a deep sense of inadequacy. The message encoded is, I will always fall short. The world is too demanding, and I am fundamentally flawed.
And that is exactly where the saboteur takes root and begins to grow.
Exactly.
So the difference between creating a hero in someone's mind and a demon in someone's mind is the scaffolding. It's the support structure.
Support is everything.
But what does that scaffolding actually look like in practical, real-world communication?
The research identifies the single most important element of that scaffolding as transparency. The text refers to this as meta-communication.
Transparency. Tell me exactly how transparency prevents the formation of a saboteur.
Let's think back to the 5-year-old child in the theta state. We established that they lack a critical faculty. They cannot analyze why the parent is acting a certain way, so they assume the parent's frustration is a permanent fact about their own worth.
Right. They just internalize it.
Transparency is the antidote to this. Transparency is when the mentor explicitly provides that analytical filter for the learner.
You give them the context.
You do not leave the learner guessing. You tell them exactly what you are doing, exactly how hard it is going to be, and exactly why you are pushing them.
So transparency acts as a manual override for the other person's brain.
Yes, precisely. It provides the context that prevents the brain from creating a catastrophic narrative.
By telling them why we're being tough, we basically bypass the misinterpretation. We give them the context they might currently lack.
That's exactly it.
Let's look at the example from the research to really cement this. The text talks about a coach training a non-athlete to compete in a grueling national championship.
Let's examine that scenario. The physical and mental stretch required to take a non-athlete to a championship level is agonizing. It requires operating at the edge of chaos every single day.
It has to.
Now imagine a coach who uses zero transparency. The athlete is exhausted, struggling to breathe, and the coach just screams, "Do it again, faster! You aren't trying hard enough."
The athlete's brain, under immense physiological stress, interprets that as a shifting target. I gave everything I had and it wasn't enough. I am fundamentally incapable.
And in doing that, the coach is actively building a saboteur in that athlete's mind.
Exactly.
But now, let's look at the exact same physical workout, but the coach uses profound transparency and meta-communication.
Okay, what does that sound like?
Before the drill begins, the coach says, "I am going to push you harder today than you have ever been pushed in your life. You are going to feel like your lungs are burning. You are going to feel like you are failing. But I need you to know exactly why we are doing this.
Giving the reason.
I am doing this specifically because your lactic threshold needs to increase for the final sprint of the championship race. I know your body is capable of adapting, but it will only adapt if we force it to this breaking point."
Wow. Think about the psychological shift there. You completely change the meaning of the pain.
You provide the critical faculty for them. The athlete still experiences the exact same grueling physical stretch, the exact same burning in their lungs, but the narrative encoded in their brain is entirely different.
Right.
Instead of encoding the pain as, "I am not fast enough, I am a failure," they encode it as, "My coach believes I have deep, untapped potential, and this specific temporary pain is the necessary mechanism to unlock it."
It turns the shifting target into continuous purposeful fuel, rather than evidence of permanent inadequacy. The failure becomes the tuition.
Yes. Transparency ensures that the challenge is recorded in the nervous system as an ally voice. It creates a virtuous biological cycle of learned resilience, where the individual learns to bounce back from failure to a progressively higher baseline of performance.
I have to pause our momentum here, though.
Okay.
Because as we talk about operating at the edge of chaos and framing painful stretches as tuition, there is a very necessary, very serious clinical caveat in the source material that we absolutely must address before we conclude.
Yes, we definitely need to address that. It is a vital boundary to establish. Everything we have discussed today, the mechanics of cognitive reappraisal, the everything is a gift mindset, finding the shared root of the saboteur and pushing people to their limits, this applies exclusively to the realm of normal psychological development.
Normal development.
Standard workplace dynamics, and well-intentioned, if sometimes misaligned, mentoring and parenting.
Right. It applies to tough coaches, demanding bosses, stressed parents, and our own inner perfectionists.
What these reframing frameworks absolutely do not apply to are instances of extreme abuse, severe trauma, malicious neglect, or criminal exploitation.
We have to be crystal clear on this point. The text is explicit.
Yeah.
If someone has endured extreme harm or abuse, the priority is not cognitive reappraisal. The priority is safety, physical protection, and professional intervention.
Attempting to reframe severe abuse as a gift or a stretch goal for personal growth is not only clinically inaccurate, it is profoundly damaging to the victim.
It's just toxic.
Healing from severe malicious trauma requires specialized professional psychiatric and psychological intervention. That process prioritizes accountability, the restoration of personal agency, and untangling trauma that is deeply, complexly somatic.
The concepts of the shared root and the expectation-disappointment loop only apply where there was actual good intent, even if the execution of that intent was deeply flawed. We are not talking about excusing abuse.
No, never.
We are talking about understanding the complex dynamics of everyday human relationships and the high expectations that shape our daily lives.
Exactly. This deep dive is about untangling the wires of ambition, love, and perceived inadequacy. It is never about rationalizing harm.
Thank you for unpacking that so clearly. It is such an important boundary to draw.
It really is.
Okay, as we look back over this entire journey, my mind is practically spinning. We have covered a massive amount of psychological and biological ground today.
It is a dense, deeply interconnected web of theory and practice.
Let's synthesize this. We started by realizing that our loudest, most vicious inner critics aren't telling us fundamental objective truths about our worth. They are just playing back faulty, unedited recordings from our theta state childhoods.
The jammed tape recorder.
Exactly. We uncovered that tragic but ultimately beautiful coevolution loop. The realization that the shifting targets that made us feel so perpetually inadequate were often born from a parent or mentor's genuine, expanding excitement about our potential. The saboteur and the ally share the exact same root.
And we saw how those external expectations become interjected over time, forming the internalized parent ego state, the loud saboteur, and the quieter ally within our complex society of mind.
And most importantly, we learned that we don't have to go to war with ourselves to find peace. We don't have to scream at the saboteur or try to delete it.
No.
We just have to use cognitive diffusion, look back at the projector beam, recognize it as an old recording, and apply the everything is a gift mindset to turn painful setbacks into valuable tuition.
And use absolute, relentless transparency when we are the ones challenging others to grow.
It is a complete paradigm shift from a state of self-blame to a state of self-mastery.
It fundamentally alters your internal landscape. You move from being a victim of your thoughts to an observer and director of them.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought. Something based on the exact mechanics we have discussed today. Something for you to mull over as you close this app and go about your week.
And this thought ties directly back to the raw neurobiology of how these voices form in the first place.
Right. We talk at length about how external voices, a parent's passing comment, a teacher's harsh critique eventually fade away, leaving only the myelinated neural pattern repeating automatically in your own inner voice.
The external literally becomes the internal.
But we also know that neuroplasticity, the brain's incredible ability to wire and rewire itself based on repeated exposure, is a lifelong biological process. It absolutely does not stop when you turn 7.
It requires more conscious focus and deliberate repetition in adulthood than it did in childhood. But the mechanism of myelination remains entirely intact until the day you die.
Exactly. So think about what that means for your future. If your brain is always recording, always wiring, always building new paths, what if, starting tomorrow morning, you intentionally began speaking to yourself in the voice of a brand new, carefully chosen mentor?
Someone who embodies the exact qualities of the ally you wish you had. Unshakable patience, fierce belief, steady encouragement, and profound grace.
Yes. What if you deliberately, consciously manufactured that voice and applied it to every single setback, every burned dinner, every failed presentation, every moment of paralyzing self-doubt?
It's a powerful idea.
Knowing the mechanics of the human brain, knowing that neurons that fire together absolutely wire together if you repeat that new supportive voice enough times. How long will it take before that powerful new voice becomes entirely indistinguishable from your own?
How long until the manufactured ally simply becomes your default reality?
That is the power of the recorder in your mind. It is constantly running. It is time to start choosing what you press record on.
This is the brief on transitioning from inner hecklers to talent whisperers. Drawing from the inner voice organs framework, we're going to unpack exactly how critical voices take root in our minds and how we can consciously replace them with voices of real, profound resilience. First, let's look at the heckler dynamic. You know those passing criticisms from others, external hecklers? Well, they actually only have the power to hurt us if an internal heckler already exists to back them up. Think of your mind kind of like an acoustic guitar. External criticism literally only makes a sound if the hollow body inside is already tuned to that exact frequency of self-doubt. Second, how do we stop this negative loop? We intercept it with an external talent whisperer. Mentors, coaches, or parents step right into this role by operating at the edge of chaos. Basically, they push us just outside our comfort zones using really transparent challenges. By explaining the why behind a tough stretch, they help us frame our setbacks as necessary tuition for growth, rather than actual trauma. Finally, this process awakens our very own internal talent whisperer. Over time and through repeated successes, we internalize those supportive external voices. They transform into a quiet, super powerful internal voice of self-belief. And here's the beautiful concluding arc. Once we awaken our own internal talent whisperer, we're fully equipped to go out and become an external talent whisperer, to spark that exact same confidence in someone else. By understanding the origins of our deepest doubts, we can consciously rewrite our internal dialogue, turning our harshest inner critics into our most powerful lifelong allies.